They say Howard Hughes saved Las Vegas from the mob. That's the story everyone tells. The reclusive billionaire who swooped in during the late 60s and bought up casinos like they were trading cards, pushing out organized crime and legitimizing Sin City. But here's what they don't tell you. Hughes never wanted to save Vegas. He wanted to own it, control it, remake it in his own paranoid image. And by the time he left town in the dead of night 4 years later, he'd done something far stranger than anyone imagined. He'd turned the desert's most famous city into his personal prison. The ghost arrives. November 27th, 1966. 4 in the morning. A private train pulls into the rail yard on the outskirts of Las Vegas. No press, no photographers, no witnesses, except for a handful of men sworn to secrecy. They carry a stretcher from the train to a waiting van. On that stretcher lies a man who was once the most famous aviator in America, the most successful film producer in Hollywood, the richest person in the world. But nobody recognizes him now because Howard Hughes Jr. has not been seen in public for years. The van drives straight to the Desert Inn, the jewel of the Las Vegas Strip, a casino hotel owned by Mo Dalitz and the Cleveland mob. The stretcher is carried through a service entrance, loaded into a freight elevator, and taken to the 9th floor penthouse. And that is where Howard Hughes disappears. Not metaphorically, literally. For the next 4 years, he will never leave that suite. He will never step outside. He will never feel sunlight. He will never see another human being, except for a rotating crew of Mormon attendants who have been hired specifically because they do not drink, do not gamble, and most importantly, do not talk. The penthouse at the Desert Inn wasn't luxurious. It was clinical. Hughes had the windows covered with blackout curtains. Tinfoil lined the edges to block every sliver of light. The furniture was pushed against the walls. The temperature was kept at exactly 78 degrees, no variance. Hughes lived naked most of the time, his hair grown long and wild, his fingernails extending into grotesque yellowed spirals because he refused to let anyone cut them. His toenails, too. He weighed maybe 90 pounds, his body wasted from malnutrition and drug addiction. He sat in a white leather chair, a Barca lounger, positioned in the middle of the room. That was his throne. That was his command center. From that chair, he would attempt to buy Las Vegas. And for a brief, insane moment, he almost succeeded. Mo Dalitz did not know what to make of his new guest. The Desert Inn had been built with mob money, Cleveland money, Teamsters pension fund money. It was one of the most profitable operations on the Strip. And now, the penthouse, which could have been rented to high rollers for thousands a night, was occupied by a man who would not leave. Dalitz was patient at first. Hughes was rich. Maybe he would gamble. Maybe he would spend. But weeks turned into months, and Hughes never came downstairs. He never played a hand of blackjack. He never pulled a slot machine lever. He just stayed up there, scribbling memos on yellow legal pads, communicating with the outside world through his chief of staff, a former FBI agent named Robert Mayhew. By January 1967, Dalitz had enough. He told Mayhew that Hughes needed to vacate the penthouse. The Desert Inn needed the space for paying customers. It was business. Nothing personal. Mayhew delivered the message to Hughes. And Hughes, from his darkened room, made a decision that would change Las Vegas forever. He would buy the Desert Inn, buy it outright, so nobody could ever ask him to leave again. The boy who built empires. To understand why Howard Hughes ended up in that penthouse, you have to go back to the beginning, back to Houston, Texas, 1905. Howard Hughes Jr. was born on Christmas Eve to a wealthy family. His father, Howard Sr., had invented a revolutionary drill bit for oil drilling, the Hughes rock bit, and turned it into a fortune. The Hughes Tool Company made millions of dollars. Young Howard grew up with everything money could buy: private tutors, the best schools, and access to anything he wanted. But he was also sickly, anxious, and obsessed with germs and contamination even as a child. His mother, Aline, was overprotective and paranoid about disease. She would check his bowel movements, inspect his food, and isolate him from other children. Some say she created the phobias that would eventually consume him. Others say Howard was born that way. Either way, the seeds of his future madness were planted early. When Howard was 16, his mother died suddenly. 2 years later, his father died too. At 18 years old, Howard Hughes inherited the Hughes Tool Company and became one of the richest young men in America. He should have been happy. Instead, he was untethered. No parents, no guidance, just money and freedom, and a mind that never stopped calculating and never stopped obsessing. Hughes moved to Hollywood in 1926. He wanted to make movies, so he made movies. Hell's Angels, 1930, was the most expensive film ever made at the time. It cost $3.8 million. It was about World War I fighter pilots, and Hughes, who had learned to fly during production, insisted on filming real aerial combat sequences. Planes crashed. Stunt pilots died. Hughes did not care. He wanted authenticity. The film made money. Hughes became famous. Then came Scarface in 1932. The Outlaw in 1943 made Jane Russell a star because Hughes designed a special brassiere to emphasize her cleavage. The man understood spectacle. He understood what people wanted to see. And he understood that money could make anything happen. But Hughes was not satisfied with Hollywood. He wanted to fly. He set airspeed records. He flew around the world in 91 hours in 1938, shattering the previous record. President Roosevelt called him an American hero. Ticker tape parades welcomed him home. He was handsome, brilliant, fearless. Women wanted him. Men wanted to be him. He dated Katharine Hepburn, Ava Gardner, and Ginger Rogers. He had everything. And then came July 7th, 1946. Hughes was test flying an experimental reconnaissance plane, the XF-11, over Beverly Hills. Something went wrong. The plane lost control. Hughes crashed into a neighborhood, smashing through 3 houses before the wreckage finally stopped. He was pulled from the burning cockpit barely alive. Crushed ribs, collapsed lung, third-degree burns, broken bones. The doctors gave him morphine for the pain. A lot of morphine. He survived. But the man who walked out of that hospital was not the same man who had crashed. The injuries never fully healed. The pain never stopped. And the morphine never stopped either. Hughes became addicted to codeine, to Valium, to injections of liquid codeine that his doctors administered daily. The drugs dulled the pain but sharpened his paranoia. He started withdrawing from public life. He started obsessing over contamination, over germs, over control. By the 1950s, Hughes was managing his business empire from hotel rooms, moving from city to city, always in seclusion, always behind locked doors. He bought RKO Pictures and ran it into the ground. He bought Trans World Airlines and turned it into one of the most successful carriers in the world before his obsessive meddling nearly destroyed it too. He made billions. He lost billions. And through it all, he retreated further and further into himself. By 1966, when he arrived in Las Vegas, Howard Hughes was not a man anymore. He was a ghost, a phantom billionaire who existed only in memos and rumors, and he had chosen Vegas as the place to make his final stand. The buying spree begins. March 31st, 1967. Howard Hughes bought the Desert Inn for $13.2 million. He didn't negotiate. He didn't tour the property. He didn't even leave his penthouse. He just had Robert Mayhew write a check, and suddenly, one of the most famous mob-run casinos on the Strip belonged to a man who'd never set foot on its casino floor. Mo Dalitz couldn't believe his luck. $13 million for a property that was profitable but aging. The deal was done in weeks. Dalitz walked away rich and clean, his mob connections severed, his reputation intact, and Hughes now owned a casino. The question was, why? Hughes didn't gamble. He didn't care about profit. He didn't even want to run the casino. He just wanted to own it, to control it, to make sure nobody could ever tell him to leave. But once you own one casino in Vegas, the next one becomes easier. And Hughes, sitting in his penthouse with nothing but time and money, decided he wanted more. In July 1967, he bought the Sands Hotel and Casino for $14.6 million. The Sands, where Frank Sinatra and the Rat Pack had turned Vegas into the coolest place on earth, where high rollers played baccarat for fortunes, where the Copa Room hosted the biggest names in entertainment. Hughes bought it. Didn't change a thing. Just added it to his collection. Then came the Castaways, a smaller property but strategically located. Hughes paid $3.3 million. Then the Frontier Hotel and Casino, $23 million. Then the Silver Slipper, across the street from the Frontier, $5.4 million. Hughes was buying casinos faster than anyone could keep track. And the Nevada Gaming Commission, which should have been alarmed, was thrilled. Because Howard Hughes wasn't the mob. He was a legitimate businessman, an American hero. His money was clean, or at least cleaner than what had come before. By the end of 1968, Hughes owned 6 casinos and controlled a significant portion of the Las Vegas Strip. The press called him the savior of Las Vegas. They said he was driving out organized crime, legitimizing the city, turning it into a respectable business destination. Governor Paul Laxalt publicly thanked Hughes for his investments. The Gaming Commission fast-tracked his licenses. Everybody wanted Howard Hughes to keep buying, but the truth was darker. Hughes didn't want to save Vegas. He wanted to control it. Every decision, every hire, every menu change in his casinos had to be approved by him. And since Hughes communicated only through handwritten memos delivered by his Mormon guards to Robert Mayhew, every decision took days or weeks. Managers waited for answers that never came. Maintenance requests piled up. Renovations stalled. The casinos started losing money. The Sands, which had been wildly profitable under mob management, hemorrhaged cash under Hughes. The Desert Inn's revenue dropped. The Frontier couldn't compete with newer properties because Hughes refused to approve upgrades, and through it all, Hughes sat in his penthouse, watching movies, writing memos, injecting codeine, and imagining a Vegas that existed only in his mind. There was one more property Hughes wanted: the Landmark Hotel and Casino. It was a disaster. A 31-story tower that had been built in 1961 but never opened because the owners ran out of money. It sat empty for years, a concrete ghost rising from the strip. Hughes looked at it from his penthouse window and decided he had to have it. In 1969, he bought the Landmark for $17.2 million, renovated it, and opened it with fanfare. It lost money immediately. But Hughes didn't care. He'd added another piece to his monopoly. The Justice Department finally stepped in. They told Hughes he couldn't buy any more casinos because of antitrust laws and too much market concentration. One man couldn't own Las Vegas, so Hughes stopped buying, but by then, he didn't need to buy any more. He already owned enough to control the city's direction, or so he thought. The Invisible Emperor. Inside the penthouse, Howard Hughes had created a world that obeyed only his rules. A world where time did not exist, where sunlight never penetrated, where the only sounds were the hum of air conditioning and the scratching of pen on paper. This was his empire, and it was killing him. The Mormon guards who attended Hughes were called the Palace Guard. They worked in shifts, never more than 2 or 3 in the penthouse at a time. They had been recruited specifically because they did not drink alcohol, did not smoke, did not gamble, and most importantly, were loyal to a fault. Men like John Holmes, Lever Myler, Roy Crawford. They cooked his food, administered his drugs, cleaned his room, and obeyed his increasingly bizarre commands without question. Hughes had rules, endless rules. If you handed him something, you had to wrap it in tissue paper first, multiple layers. If you needed to move an object, you had to use a clean towel to touch it. If he wanted a glass of water, it had to be Poland Spring, served at exactly room temperature, in a glass that had been sterilized 3 times. His meals, usually just a bowl of chicken soup or a scoop of ice cream, had to be prepared in a specific order, using utensils that had never touched anything else. He communicated with Robert Mayhew through handwritten memos, hundreds of them, thousands over the years. Some were multiple pages long, single-spaced, filled with detailed instructions about casino operations, real estate deals, political contributions. Others were incoherent ramblings about germ theory, nuclear fallout, and perceived slights from employees he had never met. Hughes became obsessed with nuclear testing. The Atomic Energy Commission was conducting underground tests at the Nevada test site, 65 miles northwest of Las Vegas. The tests would send tremors through the city. Hughes felt them in his penthouse, and he convinced himself that the radiation, the fallout, the invisible contamination was seeping into his room. He demanded that Mayhew stop the tests, use political connections, bribe officials, whatever it took. Mayhew tried. Hughes poured money into lobbying efforts. Nothing worked. The tests continued, and Hughes retreated further into paranoia. His drug use escalated. Liquid codeine injections multiple times a day, Valium to sleep, Librium for anxiety. His body was shutting down. His teeth rotted. His kidneys strained. His mental state deteriorated. But the Mormon guards kept him alive, barely. They gave him the drugs he demanded. They cleaned him when he soiled himself. They carried him to the bathroom when he was too weak to walk. They never questioned him. They just obeyed. Hughes watched movies. He had a projector set up in his room, and he watched the same films over and over again. Ice Station Zebra, a Cold War thriller starring Rock Hudson, became his favorite. He watched it hundreds of times, literally hundreds. The Mormon guards had to change the reels, rewind the film, and start it over again. Hughes would sit in his chair, naked, staring at the screen, watching the same story play out endlessly. Some nights, he'd call for specific employees at his casinos, dealers, pit bosses, entertainers. He'd demand that Mayhew bring them to the penthouse so he could interview them. But when they arrived, Hughes would refuse to see them. They'd wait in the hallway for hours. Then the Mormon guards would send them away. Hughes changed his mind. No explanation. Just another memo. This was the invisible emperor of Las Vegas, a man who owned 6 casinos but had never set foot in any of them. A man who controlled millions of dollars but lived in squalor. A man who'd once been the most famous aviator in the world but hadn't seen the sky in years. From his penthouse prison, Hughes tried to remake Vegas, but all he did was destroy himself, remaking Vegas in his image. Howard Hughes had a vision for Las Vegas. It wasn't the neon-soaked playground of the mob. It wasn't the party town where Sinatra and the Rat Pack ruled. It was something else. Something clean, corporate, controlled. A city built on respectability instead of vice. A place where families could vacation without fear of contamination or corruption. He believed he could make that vision real. He was wrong. Hughes hated the nuclear tests. He saw them as an existential threat, not just to his health, but to Vegas itself. Who would want to visit a city where atomic bombs exploded nearby? He wrote memo after memo demanding that Mayhew use political influence to stop the tests. Mayhew tried. He lobbied politicians, contacted the Atomic Energy Commission, offered donations to anyone who'd listen. Hughes spent over $1 million on the effort. The tests continued anyway. The Atomic Energy Commission did not care what a reclusive billionaire thought. National security trumped tourism. So Hughes pivoted. If he couldn't stop the tests, He'd transform Vegas into something so respectable, so legitimate, that people would come anyway. He announced plans for a massive medical center, a world-class facility that would attract top doctors and researchers. He talked about funding a university, expanding the airport, building infrastructure that would turn Las Vegas into a real city instead of a desert outpost. The local newspapers praised him, the governor endorsed his vision, civic leaders called him a genius. But none of it happened, because Hughes could not execute. He would approve plans one day, then change his mind the next. He would demand feasibility studies, then ignore the results. He would micromanage every detail from his penthouse, slowing everything to a crawl. The medical center never broke ground. The university never got funded. The airport expansion stalled. All that remained were memos. Thousands of pages of memos outlining dreams that would never materialize. Meanwhile, his casinos were failing. The Desert Inn lost money because Hughes refused to invest in upgrades. The carpets were worn. The rooms were outdated. High rollers went to Caesar's Palace or the Flamingo instead. The Sands was bleeding cash. Entertainment costs were high, and Hughes kept cutting budgets. By 1969, Frank Sinatra, the Sands' biggest draw, had had enough. He got into a fight with casino management, and Hughes, through Mayhew, essentially kicked him out. Sinatra moved to Caesar's Palace. The Sands lost its soul. The landmark hotel, Hughes' vanity project, never turned a profit. It was too far from the main strip, too isolated. Guests stayed one night and did not return. The Frontier and Silver Slipper barely broke even. Only the Castaways, the smallest property, managed to stay profitable. And that was because Hughes mostly ignored it. Hughes also clashed with what remained of the mob's interests in Vegas. While he had bought several properties, organized crime still controlled others: the Stardust, the Tropicana, the Riviera. These casinos were still skimming, still sending money back to Chicago, Milwaukee, Cleveland, and they resented Hughes. He was an outsider, a rich dilettante who did not understand how Vegas really worked. He did not pay tribute. He did not play by the rules. He was trying to change the game, and the old guard did not like it. There were rumors that the mob considered killing Hughes, having him disappear. But he was too visible, too famous, too protected. The Mormon guards were loyal, the penthouse was secure, and Mayhew, whatever his flaws, knew how to navigate dangerous waters. So the mob let Hughes play his game. They figured he would bankrupt himself eventually. And they were right. By 1970, Hughes had lost tens of millions on his Vegas casinos. His vision of a clean corporate city was nowhere close to reality. The nuclear tests had not stopped. The mob had not left. And Hughes, locked in his penthouse, was running out of time. His health was failing. His mental state was collapsing. And then came the betrayal. The escape. Thanksgiving week, 1970. Robert Mayhew received a memo. It was brief, curt, confusing. Hughes was firing him. After 4 years of running the Hughes empire in Nevada, after executing every bizarre command, after defending Hughes against lawsuits and investigations and press inquiries, Mayhew was done. No explanation, no warning, just a memo. Mayhew did not believe it at first. He demanded to speak with Hughes directly. The Mormon guards refused. Mayhew went to the penthouse. They would not let him in. Mayhew called the phone number that connected to Hughes' room. Nobody answered. Something was wrong. Mayhew suspected a coup. He believed the Mormon guards, led by a shadowy group of Hughes' advisors, had taken control and were forging memos in Hughes' name. He was partially right. Behind the scenes, a power struggle had been brewing for months. The Mormon guards reported not to Mayhew, but to a man named Bill Gay, who ran Hughes' headquarters in Los Angeles. Gay and his allies wanted Mayhew out. They believed Mayhew had too much power, too much independence. They wanted direct control of Hughes' empire, and they had convinced Hughes, in his paranoid, drug-induced state, that Mayhew was stealing from him. On the night of November 25, 1970, the Mormon guards woke Hughes from a drug-induced stupor. They told him it was time to leave. Mayhew was coming to take over. They had to move now. Hughes, barely conscious, agreed. They wrapped him in blankets, placed him on a stretcher, and carried him down the service elevator. A van waited outside. They drove him to Nellis Air Force Base, where a private jet sat ready on the tarmac. By dawn, Howard Hughes was gone. He had left Las Vegas without warning, without explanation. Nobody saw him leave except for the Mormon guards and a handful of pilots. The press did not know. The Gaming Commission did not know. Even Mayhew, who had spent 4 years managing the Hughes empire, did not know until it was too late. Hughes was flown to the Bahamas, then to Nicaragua, where dictator Anastasio Somoza welcomed him in exchange for promises of investment. Then to London, then to Acapulco, Mexico. He kept moving, kept running, paranoid that Mayhew's agents or the mob or the government was chasing him. He never returned to Las Vegas. He never set foot in another casino. He just disappeared back into the shadows he'd come from. In Vegas, chaos erupted. Mayhew filed lawsuits. The Gaming Commission demanded answers. Hughes' casinos operated in limbo. Nobody sure who was actually in charge. Bill Gay and his associates tried to assert control, but legal battles tied everything up for months. The empire Hughes had tried to build crumbled almost immediately. Howard Hughes spent the last 6 years of his life moving from hotel to hotel. He lived in Managua, London, Freeport, Vancouver, and Acapulco. He never left his rooms. He never saw daylight. His health deteriorated further. By 1976, he weighed less than 90 pounds. His hair was white and matted. His nails were grotesque. He was dying, and everyone knew it. On April 5, 1976, Hughes died on a plane flying from Acapulco to Houston. He was 70 years old. His body was so emaciated that FBI agents had to use fingerprints to confirm his identity. The man who'd once been the richest person in the world died looking like a concentration camp victim. The legal battles over his estate lasted for years. Hughes had no will, no clear heirs. Distant relatives, ex-wives, business partners, everyone claimed a piece. His casinos were eventually sold off. The Sands was sold in 1973. The Landmark closed in 1976 and was imploded in 1977. The Desert Inn survived until 2004. But by then, Hughes' ghost was long gone. Howard Hughes didn't save Las Vegas. He haunted it. For 4 years, he lived above the city like a specter, trying to control something he did not understand, trying to remake something that did not need remaking. He bought casinos not to run them, but to own them. He hired people not to trust them, but to control them. He isolated himself not to find peace, but to feed his paranoia. In the end, all he left behind was debt, lawsuits, and the legend of the billionaire ghost. But here is the irony. Hughes failed at everything he tried to do in Vegas. His casinos lost money. His vision never materialized. His attempts to stop nuclear tests went nowhere. He did not drive out the mob. They outlasted him. He did not legitimize Vegas. It legitimized itself despite him. And yet, Howard Hughes changed Las Vegas anyway, not through success, but through precedent. Before Hughes, Vegas was run by gangsters. After Hughes, it was run by corporations. Before Hughes, casino owners were street operators with mob connections. After Hughes, they were businessmen with Wall Street backing. Hughes proved that you did not need to be Bugsy Siegel or Mo Dalitz to own a Vegas casino. You just needed money. Clean money. Corporate money. Money from banks and investors who wanted returns, not blood. Hughes opened the door for Steve Wynn, for Kirk Kerkorian, for the mega resort era that turned Vegas into what it is today. The Desert Inn, where Hughes spent 4 years locked in that penthouse, was sold to Steve Wynn in 2000. Wynn imploded it in 2001 to make room for Wynn Las Vegas, a $5 billion resort that embodied everything Vegas had become. Corporate, luxurious, sterile. The mob was gone. The grit was gone. Even the ghosts were gone. All that remained was profit and spectacle. But sometimes when you walk the strip at night, when the neon fades and the crowds thin, you can still feel him. The ghost of Howard Hughes watches from a penthouse that no longer exists, scribbling memos that nobody reads, trying to control a city that never belonged to him. He wanted to steal Vegas. Instead, Vegas stole him. It took his money, it took his sanity, it took his life, and it gave him nothing in return except a place in history as the billionaire who tried to buy the desert and ended up buried in it. That was the story of Howard Hughes in Las Vegas. The ghost who tried to steal a city, the billionaire who owned everything and controlled nothing, the man who thought he could remake Vegas in his image and only succeeded in destroying himself. Did you know about Hughes's time in Vegas? Did you know he never left that penthouse? Tell me in the comments. If you love discovering the real stories behind the neon, the madness and ambition that built this city, hit subscribe because every legend has a story and Vegas never forgets.